Welcome to the Jeremiah Patterson Show, and thank you for joining me this evening. In recent months, we've seen an alarming rise in censorship here in the United States. From the Trump administration targeting media organizations and independent outlets it sees as threats, to coordinated efforts to erase Black history from classrooms, bookshelves, and museums, the right to tell the truth is under siege, and the right to speak freely is also under threat. At the same time, as part of the continued resistance movement, independent journalists, educators, and storytellers are fighting to preserve truth in the face of being targeted and silenced. And this battle doesn't just stop at history or the press. It stretches into the workplace, where Black women in particular are disproportionately fired, sidelined, or overlooked, while their white counterparts rise through the ranks. That's the focus of a powerful new initiative called the Zora Project, which actually investigates how systematic racism and sexism collide at the federal level and beyond. And this is part of a new initiative that has actually been launched by our guest tonight, Shari Dunn. She is a journalist who has never shied away from the tough stories. She is highly acclaimed for her fearless reporting, her sharp analysis, and her ability to connect the dots between censorship, democracy, and justice. Miss Shari Dunn has been a leading voice in uncovering truths others would rather bury, and her work continues to challenge the systems of power that silence, erase, and oppress. In this interview tonight with Shari Dunn here on the Jeremiah Patterson Show, we speak not only about the censorship that has been happening in the United States in regards to the cancellation of the Stephen Colbert Show and Jimmy Kimmel being pulled off the air, and also the free press effectively being muzzled or having to capitulate, even though they should not be. We also talk about the efforts to erase and censor Black history in regards to that being the preservation of white supremacy. In this interview, we also talk about her new initiative, which is the Zora Project, which is just an absolutely incredible piece of work that I really feel lots of people should be checking into. And we talk about that and more. So without further ado, this is my interview with Miss Shari Dunn here on the Jeremiah Patterson Show. Stay tuned. Joining me now for the interview is the estimable Shari Dunn. She's the author of Qualified as well as a consultant. Miss Dunn, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, so I'm excited to be here. We had interacted online and it was really interesting what you're doing. So yeah, happy to chat.
Yes, yes. It's super exciting to officially have an interview. I first wanted to speak with you about the events of the week thus far. I did sort of like a show on this yesterday. As censorship is rising in the United States, so we're seeing, not only, NPR and PBS being defunded and attacked, but also media organizations capitulating in regards to what we now have as the cancellation of the Stephen Colbert Show as well as the Jimmy Kimmel Show. And one of the comments that I had made last night is that when you're in an authoritarian state like this, one of the things that's concerning is when they start to go after the comedians, because in a
Mhm.
country where you can't even make fun of the leader on TV, then that's when the line is extremely red.
Yeah, I mean, it's designed to frighten everyone, right? Because like you said, comedy and satire is generally protected speech. And the idea that it was really Disney or the affiliates, this was driven by the White House through the FCC down to Disney, down to the affiliates, all working, it seems, cooperatively to do this. And so that sends a message to an average citizen that you are not safe to
Hmm.
speak out. I mean, that's the kind of the goal. That's the secondary goal, but I think the primary goal is to stop critique. They don't want any critique. They are very fragile. And that you just mentioned NPR and all that. They don't want any counter narrative. They only want their narrative.
Yeah.
Mm.
In regards to the FCC being politicized, I saw this as a threat very early on, especially with the things that he wanted to do and the goals that were listed. Because when you look at countries like Hungary with Viktor Orban, one of the things that they do essentially is strip the media license or the way that these independent organizations like NPR and PBS are funded. What is your view on the the exacerbating effects of that as this continues to go on? Because you're not just going to get, I feel, media that is sort of runs like it's state run because they're afraid to criticize and to report in a way that's, perceived as negative by the administration, but also people not really trusting the news anymore
Mhm.
because they don't know what's not.
Well, I think that's the goal. I mean, I think the goal is for you not to trust information so that when they do something egregious, you won't believe it.
Mm,
You know, during World War II, there were people who lived near concentration camps, but they didn't believe they were concentration camps. Like they weren't, everything had been so disintegrated as far as trust in information and media. And when you have that, it allows a huge opening for atrocities
mm,
because there's no way for me to assess. And then we have in the modern world AI on top of everything else. And so there's so much confusion that I could get away with some pretty bad things and you would be unsure. I've had people I got in contact, uh, conversations, arguments with on the internet. Donald Trump the other day on Fox News said, they asked him how he could bring the country back together. He said, I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but frankly, I could care less.
yeah.
Then he said, and the radical left, blah, blah, blah. I had somebody argue with me to say that that was taken out of context, that what he was
Mm,
really saying is he could care less what people thought about what he said about the radical left. And I said, this is insane. Like
yeah,
you can hear the period at the end of his sentence. I could care less, period, pivot. And but so
exactly.
so when you have people who actually hear things with their own ears and then they remix it to make it make sense, then they've won. They've done a really good job. They've done an amazing job. And so yeah, it's bad because it would make it very difficult to report on true things because people don't believe true things.
Yeah. When it comes to independent journalists in this era and investigative journalists, I feel like we're playing more so of a larger role because what we're seeing at the mainstream level is lots of capitulation, but also normalizing what the administration is doing or sort of characterizing it in a way that it's not as bad. I
Mhm.
wanted to ask you because I know you started the Zoran project as well as one
Mhm.
of the major things you have just started investigating, the firing of Black women at the federal level and also in workplaces more broadly. When it comes to investigative journalism and independent journalists in this moment, what do you think that we should be doing and being consistent with? Because I see us as a strong part of the resistance movement.
Mhm. Well, I spent a decade as a journalist. So I was a news anchor for a decade. And so been in journalism, was in journalism for a long time. You know, I think we have to be careful because they have proven they will sue individuals,
Hmm.
and they will go after individuals. So I think one has to be very prudent in their reporting. You have to say things like, it appears to me, it seems to me. You really do have to be careful with definitive statements, because they're not kidding around. Um,
Yeah.
and then I think we have to think about what people did in the resistance, either abolitionist resistance or resistance during World War II. And that was, what other ways can you communicate? What other ways can we communicate outside of traditional channels? And it's much harder in today's world because we have technology and there's a bit of a surveillance state situation going on. But I think those are some practical things. I think the main thing independent journalists have to do is to be as precise and use as much scrutiny as possible. In other words, I think it's important not to put a link up that you didn't look at and
Mm,
listen to the whole link. I think it's important to make sure that you know, oh, so and so said he said this. Did he? Did you see that? Did you read that? These are basic journalistic principles, but
mhm.
even journalists don't do a good job with them. And so I think for independent journalists, it behooves folks who want to tell these stories to be as precise and concise and as scrupulous as possible in making sure they're not inadvertently promoting incorrect information or telephoning information that they don't know for sure. And in today's world, it's very easy. You see a clip, you didn't listen to the rest of the clip. You didn't
Yeah,
hear all that was said. You know, this is coming up with people getting fired as it relates to the young man whose name I do not say out loud anymore. Because if you say the young man's name and you don't say it properly or say it the right way, you could get in trouble. If
yeah.
you don't say it with enough deference, you could get in trouble. So I just not going to call the person's name. But people who liked a comment but didn't read the whole comment, and then they get in trouble at work, you
Mm,
know, and this is happening literally.
yeah.
So it's important if you're going to do independent journalism to be scrupulous, to be like, oh, I heard Trump said this. Okay, did I hear Trump say this? Where's
Mm.
the video of Trump saying this? Oh, he did say something like that. Let me clarify. You know what I mean? Like that's very important.
It's freedom of speech right now. I remember it was the inauguration, and he sort of gave this part about freedom of speech, saying that we are going to bring back freedom of speech and stop censorship in the United States, which was really comical at the time. But looking at it in reverse, it's almost as if when you live in an authoritarian state like this, sort of like left-wing media organizations or independent media organizations have a difficult time surviving to whereas the right can continue to prosper and persevere in spreading known conspiracy theories and lies as we see on some more of the right-wing
Mhm.
news channel, well, right-wing entertainment channels. I wanted to ask you about this freedom of speech crackdown in regards to, people being doxxed at their workplaces and really just afraid to say anything or speaking in code. What does this moment mean for us as a country?
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly a double standard, right? Because Brian Kilmeade still has a job on Fox News when he
Yeah.
said mentally ill homeless people should be murdered,
Hmm.
just kill them. The FCC, if they wanted to investigate something, that's something to investigate.
Yeah.
There was a call for violence, and a few days later, some homeless folks, I don't know the circumstance exactly, so I don't want to say I do, but some homeless folks in Minnesota were shot at a homeless camp. Could have been internal issue. I do
Mm.
not know, but it does raise the specter that when you have somebody on a network as powerful as Fox News suggesting we murder are mentally ill and homeless, that feels like something they should get in trouble for and be pulled off air indefinitely.
Yeah.
But Jimmy Kimmel saying that, hey, the administration seems to be trying to make this shooter left wing when he's not, that gets you pulled off air. So we're not paying, it's not a fair fight.
Hmm.
And clearly, it seems to me that when these folks are talking about freedom of speech, they're talking about hate speech. They
Yeah.
want hate speech to be unrestricted. They want to be able to say as much hateful things as they want. But if you point out what they say is hateful, you're engaged in hate speech. So it's like the
Exactly.
upside down world, you know? And I think what it means is a chilling effect in our society. And I think it ultimately will breed a resentment, I think. I think they are overplaying their hand. And I think that there are a lot of people who are going to start to get more and more nervous about this because I mean, even the people who are lying to themselves somewhere know the truth. You know, they know
Hmm.
that, that does seem weird that Brian Kilmeade can say kill people and still be on the air with a simple apology. And
Hmm.
Jimmy Kimmel's off the air for something that wasn't anything. I mean, he
Exactly.
literally said nothing about the young man personally. So, the goal is to chill. when you use high profile targets like a Jimmy Kimmel or Stephen Colbert, they're wealthy, they're not going to be on the food line, but the goal is to strike fear in the hearts of everyday people. If I can do it to them, imagine what I can do to you. And that's, kind of why they're doing it.
Mm. When it comes to the attacks on DEI and just talking about race in America and the history of slavery, how do you see the erasure and the efforts to rewrite and to censor Black history as connected to the broader attacks on freedom of speech?
Yeah, I mean, because at the end of the day, it's not so much about freedom of speech in that it's really about the restoration of white supremacy.
Yeah.
And to restore white supremacy culture, you have to stop freedom of speech. You can't have people speaking openly true things because that's a danger to white supremacy.
Hmm.
You can't have truth of the history told because that's a danger to white supremacy. And they talk about, the young man, he preached against empathy, calling it new age and fake or something. Empathy is a key cornerstone of biblical teaching, really. The word empathy does not show up in the Bible, but there are tons of context clues that that's what
Hmm.
Jesus is referring to. And so the it's all about a restoration of white supremacy culture because if I can convince you that Black people are lazy bums and that's the reason they haven't succeeded, there's no such thing as systemic racism. They weren't blocked out of housing loans after World War II, the biggest generational wealth development in the history of the United States and likely the world. That didn't happen. Then I can convince you to do bad things to them because you have no empathy for them and you don't know their story. If I can tell you lies, then you'll be up for pretty much anything. And white supremacy is about supremacy. So
Hmm.
anything that says, wait, being white isn't supreme, it's just one of the many ways humanity is expressed in the world. Well, that's not seen as good, right? And so if I tell you the truth about the history of the United States, somehow that means you hate the country or you hate white people, and none of that is true.
Exactly.
But white supremacy likes to tell a child's story, good
Hmm.
and bad, cowboys and Indians. That's how white supremacy functions. And so true things are anathema to white supremacy. And I wrote a newsletter. I said it's like the water to the Wicked Witch in the Wizard of
Mm.
Oz. Truth and empathy and all that stuff has the power to destroy white supremacy culture. And so really, freedom of speech, all the stuff they're fighting about is about walling off and protecting white supremacy culture because it is quite fragile from things that could destroy it. Truth, free speech, empathy, comedy, arts,
Yeah.
collective liberation. All these things are about walling off white supremacy to protect it.
What do you think that looks like in terms of the resistance movement? Because I've been really interested in your Zoran project, as well
Mhm,
as your book, which I need to get and secure and read.
mhm,
Um, can you speak a little bit about the efforts to preserve that history, but also to do the current investigations now so that they
mhm,
are not lost? Investigating, why Black women are being fired at
mhm.
this rate and stuff like that.
Yeah, so it's the Zora Project. It's named after
Zora.
Zora Neale. That's okay. It's named after Zora Neale Hurston, who was a writer and who traveled around the country in the late 20s, early 30s to capture the stories of African Americans, many of whom were the last generation or some of the last generations of formerly enslaved people, one of whom, in a story, Barracoon, was perhaps the last enslaved person from Africa to come over into the United States. So she was trying to document these stories. So I thought, oh, what a great name to document the stories of Black women who are losing their jobs. And if we don't document the stories, once again, they'll tell the story. And the
Yeah.
story they will tell is Black women weren't qualified. We fired them all because of DEI, which is, I'm sure, what they think. Or the federal government, we didn't really fire Black people. They knew and they know that the federal government is one of the few ways Black Americans have been able to reach the middle class is through governmental jobs because to keep it 100%, corporate world has has been and still is fairly hostile to Black people.
Yeah.
So if you don't document the stories, they'll tell a different story. And so my goal with the Zora Project is to hear from the Black women themselves in whatever form they wish to share what what happened. And the bigger goal is to illuminate the fact that there's similar things. And that's when my book qualified how competency checking and race collide at work really digs into the fact that in different industries across different regions, Black people are having similar experiences in the workplace.
Mm,
How can that be? How can they be in these very different jobs and be getting the same type of pushback, the same kind of problems, the same type of difficulties? Well, it's race. It's systemic and it's about how we make assumptions about who's qualified. So if we don't tell those stories and write those stories down, there'll be no counter narrative, you know?
mm. That is really powerful and really fascinating. I wanted to ask you here lastly, sort of like looking ahead, um, are you more optimistic, or pessimistic, or just standing fierce in the resistance movement about the future of this country? I mean, I've asked so many people this question, um, especially journalists, in
Uh-huh.
regard to like the evisceration of the federal government. Like, there's been so much damage. Um, are you assured in the fact that there will be a country left to be cleaned up after this?
No, I'm not. I have to say I'm a pessimistic optimist,
Mm.
generally. Or maybe I'm a realistic optimist. I like to look at reality. And unfortunately, many of these things that are happening are things that I called at the first administration,
Yeah,
because I remember telling people, like, oh my God, if he gets in, we could lose the Supreme Court. And if we lose it, it'll be lost for 100 years. And this when he was
exactly.
running against Hillary, and people weren't listening, and da da. And so to see all of the negative things I thought were possible come to fruition is very sobering. I'm not like, I told you so. It doesn't make me feel good at all. It would be great if I was wrong. But so the fact that I see all these things come to fruition tells me we're in really serious trouble. Trouble I'm not 100% sure we can get out of, if I'm 100% honest. I mean, we have lost the Supreme Court for 100 years. And the last
Yeah.
time that happened, for Black people anyway, was with Jim Crow.
Hmm.
So when Plessy versus Ferguson was decided, that ushered in just shy, like 94, 95 years of suffering for Black people under
Hmm.
Jim Crow. It took 100 years, just about, from that Plessy court decision to civil rights legislation to begin. So, in 100 years, could we come out of it? Maybe it took us 100 years to come out of the end of Reconstruction. It took us 100 years to come out of that. So it's possible, but it's not something that will happen tomorrow. And I don't
Yeah,
think it just happens in 4 years. That's the problem. The
agreed.
amount of damage and deconstruction they've done in this, in not even a year, is not undoable in 4 years, even if you get in and play by his rules, which I would say I think we should. Should
Hmm.
Democrats or some other group get back in office, I would suggest they not try to go back to the, Robert's Rules of Order,
Yeah.
that they break things and move fast and restore everything that was broken as quickly as they can, that they work to reset the Supreme Court, that they push every limit that he pushed and farther, and then that they try to install safeguards to protect against themselves and other people in the future. So
Yes.
it would take a radical shift. It would take a turnout of unprecedented proportions in the midterms, which I think is possible. And it would take a historic turnout in the next presidential election to fight the fact that they are going to try to fight us and keep us from voting and discount votes and try to stop the transfer of power ever again. I mean, they do mean that. So I think it's going to take that. That being said, the fact that I'm a Black person, and that my family originates from the United States from slavery. I remember the saying that people would say, God sits high, but he looks low.
Mm,
And basically, what that means is there are things in the universe that I can't call. There are wild cards. Maybe there's someone in his administration who will come out and say, no, this is horrible. Let
mm,
me tell you, who will help. Maybe so there is a wild card in life that could help, that could change things that I don't know about. So I'm not going to shut off all hope because I think that anything is possible. And, coming from people who survived over 200 years of slavery, I
yeah,
know that anything is possible, but I also know it can be a long, bumpy road to get there. So,
exactly.
I have hope because you have to, but I don't know if that hope will um, come to fruition in the rest of my lifetime. And that is
Mm,
a sobering thought that
agreed.
I am in a cycle that may not complete itself within my time on Earth. And that's really heavy. So, yeah. Sorry, I bummed you out.
No, you're good. I remember every guess I get to, this is like the most sobering question. Like I'd asked someone else about this. He's from the Southern Poverty Law Center, and it was kind of that same sentiment. Completely
Yeah.
agree. That's where we are.
It's tough. It's
Yeah,
tough. It's tough because you spend your life kind of da 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 da, and sometimes politics. And you're like, oh, I don't like that person. This is stupid. But baby, this is something totally different. We're
yeah,
in the middle of something totally different. So, yep. But God sits high and he looks low. So
yes.
we don't know.
Okay, last question officially. Do you
Mhm.
have faith in the people of this country to sustain the resistance movement? Or do you believe that we are entering a period where we are going to see wide scale anticipatory obedience and people just capitulating because they're so afraid?
I think it depends. I think it depends on how far they go with physical restraint and legal. So if they do start bringing RICO charges, which is racketeering charges against people for organizing protests, I think that's going to be hard.
Mm,
If they start killing people, which I feel like they're itching to do. I mean, they did kill
hmm
him in an ICE raid in I think in Los Angeles, but they really do want to shoot protesters.
Yeah.
So if they start shooting people, I think people are going to really retreat in fear. But America is made up of hardy folks, and we haven't had to tap into who we are in a long time. But I think there is a strong strain of people here who will live free or die,
hmm
and I think they are here. And I think calling upon the ancestors and all that that means for all of us, Black, white, Asian, all of us, I think there are people who will maintain and will go, and it may ultimately have to go underground. It may be harder, but I don't think our nature as Americans is to ever fully submit. I think that's just not who we are. Even if we were to do it on the surface, just to, go along to get along, I don't think we would ever fully submit to that because I don't think it's who we are. I think the group who sustains will definitely be smaller. Don't get me wrong.
Mm,
But I think the group will be there. And I think the group will always be fighting. I mean, think again, slavery was an institution that went on 200 and something years, and
yeah.
we never stopped trying to get free. Right. And it was just us for a long period of time. Then we had white abolitionists, and we never stopped. And so I don't think we're going to stop. I don't think it's in our nature. So yeah, I think the resistance can keep going, but I think it may take different forms depending on how much they're willing to up the ante, and they are willing to up the ante. So that's the question.
Once again, my guest is the remarkable Shari Dunn, author of Qualified as well as a consultant. Thank you so much for appearing on the show. I really appreciate it, and I hope you come back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Once again, that was my interview with Miss Shari Dunn here on the Jeremiah Patterson Show. I really appreciate all of you watching. Once again, that was just an absolutely incredible discussion. I related very much to her last answer that she gave there, not just about being real about where the country lies right now, but also faith in the resistance movement still, but also doing our part effectively to resist what's happening right now and continuing to report the news without fear, favor, or interference whatsoever. And so that's going to be the continued mission of the Jeremiah Patterson Show. I know that's going to be the continued mission of Miss Dunn's work as she does incredible, indefatigable, prestigious investigative work with the Zora Project and so much else that she continues to pursue. Be sure to follow her on all her social media accounts as well as check out her website. If you are not subscribed to the Jeremiah Patterson Show, please be sure to subscribe, as well as become a member today to our website, tjpsnews.com. You can become a member to the Jeremiah Patterson Show. We have paid memberships here on tjpsnews.com. You can also donate through the Truth in Transit series or our GoFundMe accounts, or these are the other ways to donate as you are helping to sustain independent journalism. Thank you so much for your support. I really do appreciate it. Have a good night, everyone. Remember, eyes open, heads up, stay focused, continue to be a part of the resistance movement.